The Carnegie Institution, George Eastman, and the widow of E. H. Harriman, singled out specific undesirable traits, from alcoholism to an inordinate love of the sea, and then sought to sterilize those who exhibited such traits. The movement grew in America, and opium, from the Lodge to the Den 271, was adopted by Nazi Germany, which then showed the world the ultimate expression of these beliefs. President Grant and Julia Dent. The Delano family's influence continued, as Susanna Delano married Captain Noah Grant in June 1746. They had a son Noah, also a sea captain, who married Rachel Kelly. They also had a son Jesse, who married Hannah Simpson. Jesse and Hannah Grant's son was Ulysses Simpson Grant, the renowned Civil War general and United States President, who married Julia Dent. The Dent family of England ranked alongside the Jardines and Mathesons in the opium trade. 17, but the prosperity of the trade may not have extended to the American Dents. The memoirs of Julia Dent Grant mentions her father as a prosperous landowner descended from a Maryland plantation owner, and her mother's father as a China trader in the firm of Renshaw, Peacock, and Pillen. The American Dents were a New England family who took part in the early China trade first, by exporting ginseng to that country. Julia Dent's mother and father came to the Midwest, to trade along the Mississippi River with Edward Tracy. Ulysses Grant was a late bloomer who had drifted down to failure and disgrace during his early army career. He drank to the point that he was broke, and finally resigned from the army. He failed at farming, failed at selling real estate, and made only a modest income as a clerk until someone convinced him to return to the military. The Civil War saved his reputation, and gained him the presidency of the United States. America's merchant families go to war. The elite merchant families of Boston and New York grew wealthy in the opium trade, which was inherited from England. China, however, suffered. The Chinese rapidly became addicted in increasing numbers. The 272 from the sacred to the profane importation of opium chests numbered 5,000 in 1821, and grew to 39,000 by 1837. This figure represents 6,630,000 pounds of opium. Soon the addiction reached the royal palace. Emperor Tao Kwang lost 3 sons to drug addiction, and it was estimated that China had 4 to 12 million addicts. 18. The emperor conducted a study of the effects of opium on his country. He was told that for the first time his treasury was being drained of silver, rather than being resupplied by the tea trade. Brigandage plagued the highways. Soldiers refused to fight, and when coerced to fight against other warlords, the soldiers were defeated. It was obvious that corruption was spreading in the army and the civil service. Mandarins were regularly bribed to allow the importation of illegal products, and at Canton the marketplace was stocked with the apparatus of the opium trade. The emperor ordered a crackdown, and numerous drug users were arrested. To drive home the emperor's point, an opium merchant was publicly crucified in Canton. A Chinese boat was caught unloading opium believed to have been bought from Thomas Perkins. At first nothing was done, but then all trade came to a halt. On the day Bernard Forbes became a partner at Russell & Company, he complained that they could not unload a chest of opium. 19 Russell & Company made an announcement that it would cease trading opium. Its agent, John Green, sent instructions to India to stop all opium trading, but it was too late for them and for others. The agent of the emperor, Lin Sisu, surrounded all the British and American ships and subjected them to house arrest. He then confiscated 20,000 chests of opium and staged the Chinese version of the Boston Tea Party, mixing the opium with lime and throwing it into the water. Russell & Company lost 1,400 chests, Jardine and Matheson lost 7,000 chests, and the British Dent & Company lost 1,700 chests. Even after the destruction of millions of dollars worth of drugs, the house arrests continued. Wealthy Americans in China, including Warren Lano, A. Low, and John Green, were forced to do without servants, and had to cook for themselves for the first time. The punishment was considerably less harsh than that inflicted on their Chinese opium. From the Lodge to the Den, 273 partners in the trade, who were jailed and quickly executed. Finally the opium debate reached Parliament. Statesmen like William Gladstone decried the trade in opium and its effect on the Chinese, but in the end the money was the key. The only way to compensate the British businessmen for their loss was to declare war on China. The brief war compelled China to sign a treaty giving the British Hong Kong and access to its markets. The legacy of the China trade, the area that would become Hong Kong, replaced the tiny islands and floating warehouses that served as the storage facilities for opium. From Hong Kong, ships could sail up along the coast and spread opium to even greater numbers of the Chinese population. But along with legality came a decrease in profits. The shipping firm called the Peninsular and Oriental Steamship Line allowed Chinese buyers to place orders for opium directly with India, eliminating the British middleman. But some companies thrived in the new situation. For the firm of Jardine and Matheson, the Opium War represented a new beginning. Made famous by the James Clavell novel Noble House, Jardine and Matheson, the house that opium built, grew and prospered as a result of having the power of England behind it. Today Simon and Henry Keswick, direct descendants of William Jardine, run the company, which is not known to have broken English or Chinese rules since the Opium War days. It has its many tentacles in shipping, the Cunard Line, trading, auto sales, brokerage, engineering, restaurants and hotels, property investment and management, insurance, and banking. The power Jardine and Matheson once wielded in London is no longer as strong, as the company was unable to persuade Margaret Thatcher to hang on to Hong Kong. In 1984 Hong Kong was 13 years away from reverting back to Chinese rule. Jardine and Matheson moved its exchange listing to Singapore, which infuriated China. The hard feelings between the company and modern China still persist. Jardine and Matheson is thought by many, including China, to have 274 from the sacred to the profane played a role in getting Chris Patten appointed Hong Kong's last governor under British rule. Patten's democratic reforms and Henry Keswick's criticism of China after Tiananmen Square in 1989 have kept the relationship tenuous. 20 In 1995 more than half of Jardine's profits were still earned in China and Hong Kong. A competing company from the Persian English family of Sassoon also had a major part in the China trade. Like their Scottish counterparts, the Sassoons brought opium to China, but theirs was homegrown. Salah Sassoon was the treasurer to the Omar Pasha, or governor of Baghdad. When the Pasha was overthrown, the family moved to Bombay. Sassoon's son David became a merchant, and was granted a license to trade in Indian opium and cotton. The Opium Wars were a brief setback, but David's son Edward Albert brought opium profits home to England, where he increased the family fortune in the textile trade. Being knighted by the Queen was Edward's reward for his contribution to the economy, and marrying a Rothschild was a means of ensuring his power. The opium legacy in America. For their part in the drug business, the Americans took home a lot of money. In 1844 Caleb Cushing created the American Treaty with China, which officially allowed American ships in the China trade. After the wars in China, the drug smuggling business became more dangerous, as there was Asian competition and there were much faster steamships. British and American firms started bringing drugs to safer shores their own. In Britain, the cities of Liverpool, Dover, Bristol, and even London were the import drug centres. This was around the time that the attempts to regulate opium use became serious. 21 Between pre- and post-opium wars, the opium imports in England tripled to £280,000. 22 The drug was even prescribed to children in such concoctions as Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, and unwed mothers discovered it was an easy way to terminate an unwanted pregnancy. Opium would be regulated as a poison in 1868, but without substantial opium. From the lodge to the den, 275 penalty. Opium's derivative morphine was soon the cause of massive addiction of returning Crimean War veterans, who learned to inject the drug. The drug trade in Europe became widespread, and it was the product of an alliance between criminal families from various nations and Swiss and German pharmaceutical companies.